Hey guys, this is Morgan Green, aka Morgizzle, and I'm with the Honorable Renata Woods, aka Spud Cuts, and with the very, very, very lovely Remy with the I, not a Y.
Yo.
And today, and welcome to Gather Around.
Yes.
Today we have a very special guest. I follow him. I love his page. He's extremely smart, extremely funny. His name is Brian Baez.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
So he is a political commentator and a social media content creator.
That's right.
All right. So welcome to GatherAroundATL.
Welcome.
All right.
Happy to be here. Thank y'all for having me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We're excited too. Very excited. Very excited.
So how about the debate last night?
Well, I do want to say, man, Trump did a wonderful job last night.
You can choke.
Wonderful.
Anyway, delete.
I'll just.
I was ready. I'm ready for the other perspective.
Okay.
Maybe you had a different perspective. All right. That's fine.
Hey, you were ready to be really open to it. You were like,
let's do it. Let's have the conversation.
Let's go. I'm ready.
yeah, that's really good.
I'm not somebody who's really afraid of having that conversation with people who differ or disagree, right?
Okay.
100%, right? I think we have to have a better understanding as a society to get to a place where we can have conversations with people we disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because that gets us the full picture in the puzzle. But I'm also a debater, so I'm ready.
That.
And last night, answer your question, last night was my Super Bowl. I am the biggest debate nerd as it comes down to people articulating and expressing themselves, because I was forced to be on the debate team when I was younger. So I'm really hypercritical about that. But yeah, no, I think Kamala Harris did her thing. She did exactly what she needed to do in terms of messaging, but also getting under the skin of Donald Trump and put out that bait.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he took it every single time because he's a toddler.
Yeah.
He's a baby. He's like, he's just a petulant child inside of an old man's body. And so I think that was my perspective. I don't know what y'all thought.
No, that was a really, what I really want to start with is I do feel like people have a tough time debating respectfully. And I feel two topics that often I notice that is politics and religion.
Right.
And it's like so many more people I feel like would be educated or maybe open-minded to even having the conversation if they didn't feel like it would always escalate or if they didn't feel like they would always be attacked or judged for their opinion. So the fact that even though he started out with a joke, you would have been open to that and you enjoy debating or having conversation respectfully, I can appreciate that. And I feel like if more people had that mindset, maybe they would be open to talking about or even learning about what they don't know without being so defensive.
Right. Because
So I like that.
because how do we learn though? Right. That really becomes the question.
Right.
I'm as someone who's an educator outside of doing social media, right? Because a lot of people who critique what we do don't understand that this is secondary and tertiary to the job that we have.
Right.
In the real world, I have a full-time job that I do, and I'm an educator, but I keep that separate. But part of that is I've done facilitations on the differences between safe spaces and brave spaces, right? As an example, a lot of people always want to create a safe space. Oh, this is a safe space. And that's a great buzzword. But the reality is that's great for processing specific events. Let's say there's tragedy in the world where you need to have most marginalized people convene and discuss things so they can process it together. Great for therapy, great for giving more resources, but not for learning and teaching. That's not the space for that. You need to have brave spaces where you can have controversy within civility, right? And being able to have those conversations with people that you disagree with, because when you learn is when you get out of your psychological comfort zone. Getting out of your psychological comfort zone doesn't mean that you're being abused. Doesn't mean that you're being attacked. It just means that you are uncomfortable because this may be new information that you are exposed to that you may never have been exposed to in the past.
I agree. Your norm is challenged.
That's right.
And when that happens, I feel like this is oftentimes met with more reluctancy than it is acceptance.
Absolutely.
And big difference, safe space, brave space. I appreciate that. And I feel like a lot of norms, like you say, thought norms come from upbringing, come from experiences. And a lot of times people can't deviate from what may be fact, from what they grew up knowing.
Right.
And so that's dope.
Yeah, just answer my question. I was basically going
That's dope.
No, because I was going to ask, why is it that every time someone talks about politics or just religion in general, it can always end up in a fight? You know what I mean? Like, how come we can't have two different opinions, be passionate about our opinions, but still not disrespect the other person?
Well, we're in a place where now things are so divisive. And I think one of my biggest challenges is trying to make sure that we break down topics before we get to the politics. Because see, the reality is when we're talking about, let's say, as an example, bodily autonomy, right? When we're talking about people to have the choice and the decision to do with their body without the government telling them what to do, right? That is not something that should be partisan. That should not be something that a political party endorses one side or the other. Right. The reality is that it's a human right and that humans should have the autonomy to decide what happens to them, right? So when we talk about abortion, that's what we're talking about. Right. Stop making it about blue or red. Stop making it about what political affiliation do you have, because that doesn't get us to a solution. And oftentimes we don't find people in politics that are wanting to get to solutions. They just want to talk about the D or the R after their name. Right. And that's what matters to them. And unfortunately, that's what gets people so disillusioned with politics, because it's not about getting answers or solutions. It's about, okay, well, I support blue or red.
All right. Right. How to get a vote.
That's right. They were talking about, say that one more time.
How to get a vote. Yeah. Pandering.
Yeah. Last night they were talking about abortions and how I think Trump, don't quote me, had said something to the extent of, I guess the current office are allowing people to have abortions at 9 months. But then they fact checked it and said that wasn't true.
Yeah, I don't think that's true.
I never heard of it.
That's not true. 90% of abortions happen before 13 weeks, right? Prior to Roe v. Wade. That's the facts about abortion. Right now, it's women and literal children are in danger because of the Trump trigger bans that happen. We call them Trump trigger bans because that's what it is. It's not about branding it a specific way. Roe v. Wade was overturned because Donald Trump and Republicans played a long game to appoint 3 conservative justices, right? We have Amy Coney Barrett that he appointed. He appointed Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And so having these justices on there and even before him, right? Republicans have been playing that long game. You have Clarence Thomas, right? So you have 6 Republican judges on the court. You have 3 that are liberal, and 6 of them decided to overturn Roe v. Wade. He has since again and again taken credit for overturning Roe v. Wade, saying things, egregious things like, well, everybody wanted this. Democrats, women, men, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, men, everybody. He says these outrageous statements that are not true. Not true, right? But literally women and children are at risk. You have women that have ectopic pregnancies, right? Or pregnancies that they're literally about to lose and or have lost, that they are forced to bring to term in all of these states, because these trigger bans came about after Roe v. Wade was overturned. So you had also at the DNC, Hadley Duvall. Yeah. The story of who talked about at 12, she was sexually assaulted and impregnated by her stepfather. These are stories that are really happening. And we clearly see that there's a divide. You talk about pandering, and you mentioned that word. For me, that is not a trigger, but it's a specific word that elicits a specific reaction out of me, because I think a lot of people misuse that term. I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying a lot of people misuse that term because they say, well, both parties are the same. Both parties are just pandering. And my issue with that is that there's a clear, stark contrast and bolded line between the two parties and what they fight for. Right. You have one party who has consistently championed people like J.D. Vance, who has attacked women who can't bring children to term because of whatever reason that they have, and have called them miserable, childless cat ladies. Right. You have you have people who have championed and made the top of the ticket for the Republican Party a person like Donald Trump. 34 convicted, felonies aside. Let's talk about the fact that he's just a sexual predator. Let's talk about the fact that he actually was found liable in a court with a jury of his peers, found liable for sexual assault on E. Jean Carroll, was forced to pay her $85 million after 2 defamation cases. A lot of people don't talk about that. So when we talk about pandering, when we talk about who's on what side, and are both parties the same, they are not. And I'm always willing to have that conversation.
Ready.
I agree, man. And something that you said, the Republicans play the long game, and they do, because it's crazy. I didn't know until we actually started researching 2025 that it started. Is that Reagan that it started like way back in the day?
So the Heritage Foundation.
They've been building this years ago. Before Trump, the whole Republican side been building Project 2025 to finally, in the right time, to basically release it, almost like a atomic bomb. And been working on it for a long time, just waiting on the right time to drop it.
And for clarity, Donald Trump did say that he backed up the Heritage Foundation. I think it was like 2 years ago in an interview.
That guy's delusional, man. Because he'll say one thing today and then swear next week, well, I didn't say that.
Well,
or
that's
if they
not
pull up the
delusional.
video, he'll say, well, I didn't mean it like that.
Well, I don't think that's delusional. I think he's intentionally talking to the people that it's in front of him. And there's hearsay that he basically would say things that aren't true intentionally, but he says that he's going to keep saying it over and over and over again where people are actually going to start to believe him. So I think he's intentional. I don't think he's delusional. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. Okay. I think he knows exactly how to create a spark in social media and to get people to constantly talk about him. Unfortunately, people don't really do their own research. So that's where the issue really lies for me.
The problem.
Well, let me ask y'all this. Do y'all feel like a part of their tactics is like fear? Like basically
Republicans?
Yes. Saying basically if you don't vote here, this is what you're going to get. Instead of saying, because if they actually said their policies, we're not really going for their policies. So the best thing to do is to scare you into, if you don't vote for us, this is what you'll get.
Yes.
That's exactly what they did yesterday.
When that is not true, like he just said.
Yes.
I'll just keep telling you lies until they become true in your mind.
That was hearsay from someone who worked for him before, and I think they were talking about that at the DNC, if I'm not mistaken. I watched a YouTube clip, so I'm like, "Oh wow, that's cute."
No, but that's not just a theory, right? And I think the Republicans have done a good job throughout time to make us feel like that's a conspiracy theory when it is not. That's true with everything with white supremacy. Let's talk about that. White supremacy has done a good job of making us feel like the things that are reality are actually not. So that when you talk about things, there's no way that you can actually dismantle systems if we're still distracted by the debate of if it even exists. That's the first part. So when you talk about whether or not they're using division, absolutely. It's the Southern strategy. I mean, the Southern strategy, historically speaking, is what they've been using. That is the Republican racist playbook. The reality is, when you can sow division and you can tell people that I'm going to be your savior, that's what he has done. He literally, on the 2016 RNC convention, when he was accepting the nomination the first time around, said, "I alone can fix it." That's what he said. I alone can fix it. Beyond that, and see, this is the reality, right? The reality is that, and this is why I got so upset. And I think we talked about this a little bit off camera in terms of the content creator question, because I have a big problem with journalists who have had a problem with the fact that content creators were at the DNC, because they think that I think they conflate the concept of content creators and influencers to be people who just do TikTok dances and who follow trends online. And that's not what the fuck I do. Can I curse on here?
Yeah.
That's not what the fuck I do.
Right.
So what I do is, again, like I said, this is secondary and sometimes tertiary for me because I have other things going on.
Right.
I have my master's in education. I have a bachelor's in political science. I know what the fuck I'm talking about. I know how to do my research. So when it comes down to triangulating and looking at scholarly peer-reviewed journals and articles to corroborate my information, there was literally a study and a research that talked about what it is that it is when Trump speaks about specific things and how it turns out that he's actually a cult of personality. A lot of people have consistently talked about his followers being in a cult, and people say, well, you have drunk the Kool-Aid. And people take that as comedy. It's not comedy when you actually look at psychological studies that have literally showed and dissected that statement at the RNC in 2016, when he said, "I alone can fix it," is along the lines of what any other cult leader has actually used.
Right.
So those people are just blindly accepting some of that information. And yes, when he says the black and brown people coming across the border, millions are pouring in, immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country, that's specific language.
Right.
Agreed.
That's using
that
fear.
language was used before.
Right. Hitler used that language as an example.
I was going to say probably was a dictator.
Yeah.
So when you hear him say, or his followers, "Make America Great Again," what do you think they're referencing?
Well,
because I don't really understand. Again, make America great again. So with your research and studies, or maybe when you have conversations with people or comfortable debates and they bring that up, what do they mean?
Yeah. Well, "Make America Great Again" was not a tagline that Donald Trump created. See, a lot of people don't know that Make America Great Again was a tagline that Ronald Reagan used in the 1980s.
Wow.
Donald Trump just came out, and when he used it, he trademarked it. Because that's what he did. That's what he does.
Okay.
So Make America Great Again. I always, and I've said this in videos, I implore people to ask directly and straight up to Donald Trump's followers, what does Make America Great Again mean? And what again are you talking about?
Well, what does that look like exactly?
Yeah, well, that's what gets me again.
I think we actually have a picture of that now.
What year?
When?
What year?
Make America Again for who?
Right.
Make America Great Again for who?
That's right.
I think those are my two questions. When is again and for who?
Right.
And what does it look like? But I think the Party 2025 is, what does it look like?
And he said on last night's stage that he knows nothing about Project 2025. It had nothing to do with it.
No.
Lies.
He said it's the opposite.
Definitely a lie.
More than 100 plus of the people who used to work in his direct administration now work with the Heritage Foundation and co-founded and co-wrote Project 2025. The fact that he is now trying to distance himself, literally, we have the person and people from the Heritage Foundation. By the way, for the people who don't know what the Heritage Foundation is, let's break that down. Let's take it a step back.
Yeah, let's do that.
Right. The Heritage Foundation is a think tank. What is a think tank? It is a organization, a nonprofit organization located in DC. There are many of them. There are liberal on the liberal side that do it for Democrats, and there are Republican ones that do it for the conservatives on the Republican side. Mm-hmm. They basically create legislation. See, a lot of people don't know, and a lot of people don't understand the back end of Washington, D.C. They just think, well, I elect you, Morgan. You're going to represent me, and you are going to try to have your constituents in mind, and you're going to say, I'm going to create some legislation that's going to help my constituents, because that's what I'm here to do.
Okay.
Right. That's not how that works. Not in a large, overwhelming percentage of the times. What ends up happening is these think tanks create legislation and literally write them up. And they send them over to the people who are in office, and they go ahead and they use copy and paste, introduce it as legislation sometimes. And so the Heritage Foundation has been creating legislation for Republican administrations for decades. And actually in 2016, during Trump's administration, they were actually like applauding Trump for doing 60+% of what they wanted them, like what the Heritage Foundation wanted to do. So they actually enacted 60% of that. And they were like, oh, this is great. Trump can say that he doesn't know anything about Project 2025, but he's been at the Heritage Foundation. Similarly with his VP candidate, J.D. Vance, and have been both on camera saying, y'all have been doing amazing work, and actually been saying your work will guide us into the future. We know what the hell they're talking about. People from the Heritage Foundation are literally on camera, like in closed rooms, spy cameras, caught saying, we know that Donald Trump is trying to distance himself from Project 2025. It's all part of the plan. And by the way, it's not just that. We also know, right, that there are 70 people who work in election offices across the country, particularly in battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, that are people who think that Donald Trump still won the 2020 election, that still certify and say that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. And what they're planning on doing in part of these election offices, they're trying to create and change the rules so they don't have to certify the election if Kamala Harris wins.
That makes sense.
Right.
And what they will try to do, and I put this video out too.
That was good.
I broke down that plot.
I saw that. What will happen?
What will happen? Exactly. I don't need a crystal ball to let you know what happened because I see the playbook right in front of our eyes. They're going to say that it's stolen. They're going to try to create these rules, right? Change these rules to not certify the elections. And even if there's no proof, because they're going to say, well, there's some voting irregularities. Dead people are voting. This, that, and the third. You mark my words. You heard it here. I'm saying it.
Yeah, I hear it.
This is exactly what's going to happen. They're going to say there's something happening. We got to look into it. There's voter fraud, and there could be zero voter fraud. But the fact that they're delaying it at the local level is going to create a national media storm. And the media is only going to cover, well, there may be some potential voter fraud. It's going to get to millions of people. Millions of people are going to be confused about what's going on. And that's what they want, to be able to incite something like what was incited on January 6th. Y'all watch.
He's like the author for confusion, but I'm trying to figure out why would they do it again if he already got charges.
It's almost like insurance on the election.
But didn't he get charged
for January 6th?
And also for saying that he stole the election, or the election was stolen, right? Well, that's what I thought I've heard.
I believe he just would do it.
Well, they didn't find proof in any of
which is why they said
went to court. Yeah,
and he lost, did he not?
Well, so in the case, the case you're talking about specifically about, because there's so many court cases, but the case that you're talking about specifically about January 6th and whether he incited or not the insurrection on that day, that's the case that went all the way to the Supreme Court, where they were talking about presidential immunity.
Right.
And the Supreme Court said that you do have presidential immunity if it was an official act. But we're not going to define what an official act is, right? We're going to let the courts decide. So they said, essentially was, Trump, you're not getting full immunity. We're going to give you immunity if you can prove in court that it was an official act. But we're going to send it back to that lower level court. And they're going to have to litigate to see whether or not it was an official act of you meeting with those people, if you not getting any security down to the Capitol, all these different things. And the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, went ahead and quickly rewrote that indictment and re-indicted him on 4 criminal counts. So we are waiting to see what happens.
After the election.
Well,
that's the only thing, because he actually...
Can I say this? Because I just had this conversation in private with some other content creators. And some people were trying to say, well, but while we get into the debate, we should not use this concept of, and they didn't say it in a negative way, but this is how I read it in my mind. Like, we shouldn't use prosecutor versus felon. That's a bad tagline. We should move away from it. Because in this country, we have a fucked up criminal justice system. And let me tell you, I was the first one to be like, yes, we the fuck do. We understand the criminal justice system has been fucked up. But in this situation, that is different. In this case, when we talk about Kamala Harris being the prosecutor and Donald Trump being the felon, this is actually subversive, right? Undercuts exactly what we know the criminal justice system to be. Because we have, on one hand, a prosecutor. On the other hand, we have a white man who has used his white privilege to consistently evade accountability from the law. That's a complete different scenario. Yep. When you have Kamala Harris saying, I'm going to hold him to account and I'm the prosecutor and I know his type, that's very specific. That's very different than the conversation. And then the person came back to me and said, well, you know what? To be honest with you, this is it. I mean, it's just not different than my family or my friends. Like, Donald Trump may not hear you call him a criminal and a convicted felon, but your friends and your family who are convicted felons will be dehumanized by it. And I was like, nah. That's very different. My friends and my family, if they're convicted, they're not going to get unlimited media time to be able to tell their side of the story. My family, my friend that's convicted,
they went to jail.
Right. They're going to go to jail. They're not going to be walking around freely. They're not going to be, they're not going to be endorsed by the literal fraternal order of police.
They wouldn't be able to vote.
They wouldn't be able to vote. Like, this is a complete different conversation. So as it relates to that, yeah, I just wanted to talk to that because I'm like, that's annoying to me too.
Well, let me ask you this, because you seem very, very, when you talk about this, you seem very, very passionate. Like, where does your passionate for political come from?
That's a good question. You know, when I was younger, I was, like I said, I was forced onto the debate team.
By whom?
By my English teacher.
Okay.
I remember it was my quick story. I was about to leave school. I was in 6th grade. And they sent my favorite teacher. He sent a student to the classroom. Go get me. I was like, I'm going home. Like, I love you, but I'm going home. I'm out.
Right.
And so he was like, no, you're going to wait for me next to 801, room 801. And that's where the 8th graders were. 6th grader going to the 8th grade. I'm like, what the fuck? Why does he want me to be here? Like, so all these 8th graders leaving out, the bell rang, all this stuff. He comes down the hall. He's like 20 minutes later. He's like, why are you not inside? And I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here. He's like, well, today you're joining the debate team. He brought up the debate coach. I was like, no, I'm not. And he's like, yes, you are. And here's what I hated him then, right? Yeah. But I loved him afterwards, years later, because I was able to appreciate what he did. Someone coming from Newark, New Jersey, where I didn't have any, I came from nothing.
I was just going to ask you where you're from, because
I came from nothing. Yeah. Right? You know, and people don't know the story, but if I eat rice if I eat rice and eggs every day, I eat rice and eggs every day. If I had months without electricity, we had months without electricity, but we made the fucking shit meet. The reality was he saw something in me that I was never going to be able to see myself at that time, that nobody was going to have who was in my family, wasn't anybody would have the resources or the know-how or the knowledge to say, this is what you should do. And so anyway, so I remember getting onto the debate team, and I remember our first debate topic was resolved that the United States federal government should be providing direct public health assistance to sub-Saharan Africa. And I was like, what the fuck?
That's topic. This day one.
That's right.
This topic number
day
one.
Day one. Topic number one.
For a sixth grader.
That's it. For a sixth grader.
Man.
And I had to get involved in that mindset. And so I had to learn about international relations. My mind had to be exposed to things that were outside of the norms of just the domestic or just my day-to-day or just the, you know what I'm saying? The monotony of growing up in the hood and being at a tier 4 failing school that we were on the chopping block.
Wow.
Right. And so that's, I think, where it came from. I think that comes from, you'll see the passion, you'll see the intrigue, and what compels me to be into these types of topics and to have these types of conversations. But more importantly, how it is that I break it down.
Right. Yes.
Because it's important. The delivery, because that's, and see how this comes full circle. This is how this is how life works, right?
Yeah.
That then informs how I show up online. Because it's super important for me. That's what my charge is, to make sure that the information gets to the people in a way that they're gonna understand. Because in a lot of ways, there's a lot of information that is just so difficult for people to process because 1, they don't have the bandwidth. 2, because systemic injustices have made it so they don't have the opportunity and capacity to even process it. And 3, because it's been made inaccessible. A lot of people think that politics is just old people in a room having conversations and making decisions based on their lives and don't know that the shit could actually be salacious sometimes, that you can have a staffer that's having sex in front of the damn, in one of those offices and get caught, that it can just be, and that's why my tagline is politics is pop culture. That's why that is. Because as much as people pay attention to Real Housewives of Atlanta, and as much as people as much as people put so much attention on Zeus and baddies, which by the way, I like trash TV just as much as anybody else.
Listen, I love me some RHOA.
Right. Don't let the fucking
I tune in.
Some Nene.
Don't let the politics motherfucking fool you. I could get down with that shit, and I love that Tokyo Tony's searching for love bullshit. Like I love all of that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, that shit that shit doesn't touch what happens in your check.
Yeah.
Right? That don't determine anything about your taxes. That doesn't determine whether you get a child tax credit if you're a first time parent. That doesn't a mother. That doesn't touch into all these different things that actually impact your life. So we got to get with the program.
I love that.
So I know we got more questions. I don't want to be on this long, but so being in the 6th grade, he had to see something before telling you to come and join the debate team. Yeah. Like, what was it that he saw? Like, were you like...
What do you think he saw?
What do you think it was?
You debating somebody in class? Or?
I was the person...
Probably him.
I was the person in school who connected with everybody. I connected with everybody. I sat down with the girl who had the aide, right? Who had the aide, who's in a wheelchair. I sat down with her during lunch. I was sat down with the cool kids because I was funny. Because I always knew, my mom always taught me, right? She was like, you get hit back. Let them call me, right? And you were either getting or getting got. That's it, right?
Especially
that's
up north. Listen.
That's in the hood.
And middle school's tough.
Middle school
is tough.
It's rough, right?
It's worse than high school.
That's where people first learn how to roast.
That's right.
You better know how to Joan.
That's right.
You better know how to Joan.
Right.
Because they're going to get you.
Because I was real skinny too, so it's like, you better have something to say.
You have to be quick.
That was real fruity.
Right.
You gotta have something to say.
That helped me be quick. That's why I be getting on everybody now.
Yeah, so that's what it was. Like, I was the kid that was with everybody, but I was also the smart kid.
Yeah.
I was also the smart kid who's always getting A's. And I remember in that specific class, the reason why he was my favorite teacher. Just a quick story, real quick. I was the kid that would go before school started to the bodega and buy 2 cups of coffee at like 50 cents each and go to school before school started and sit down with my teacher to talk shit. That's who I was.
Oh,
get it.
Yeah, it is then.
And I was the person who actually after school would talk shit about, shit, just real life shit.
Yeah.
And because, and talked a little bit about this off screen too, I had never met my dad. Now, my mom was a single mom, right? Because of that, I was a parentified child, right? There was an emotional burden, a financial burden that I had to take on as a kid.
I can relate.
So because I had to take that on, I was never looked at really as don't sit at the grown folk table. I was invited to the grown folk table. And I was never told, stay in your place. When my mom's friend came over, their kids couldn't be at the grown folk table, but I could.
Were you an only child?
No, I wasn't. I had an older brother who was 3 years older. But here's the thing. I was invited to those tables because in many ways, I had to inform what happened at those tables. My mom didn't finish college, but she was at college. I remember reading Oedipus the King and helping her with her book report.
Wow.
I remember
what age?
I was in middle school.
Wow.
And I remember helping her friends with their book reports and their essays, because my mom's language was not the best. You know, Puerto Rican Spanish was her first language. But essentially, did I say Spanish was her first language? Yeah, Spanish.
Yeah.
Spanish was her language. So so that's the whole point. So I had to take on some of those things, right? When it came down to us facing eviction potentially, I had to be the one to take the damn note, be able to look my mom in the eyes and say,
could read it.
Right. And say, I don't know how we're going to fix this, but we're going to fix this. Put it in my book bag, talk to the vice principal the next day. The next day, had to go in and put in all the paperwork. And so I was the one who was overseeing the finances of the house. When the bills came in, I was the one who was putting the money aside to pay. When it came down to the checks coming in, the direct deposits, when the tax refunds came, I had to be the one to delineate what's going to savings, how are you going to get to Puerto Rico to see our family, and how are we going to make these ends meet. I had to do that. But people wouldn't know that because people just judge you based on what they see,
right,
and not what the real story is.
So you're intellectually gifted as a kid.
Yeah.
You are caring.
Yeah.
I feel like you were taught how to hustle at a very early age.
Yeah.
Really exposed to that. I feel like that creates a very strong man that I'm seeing today, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Thank you.
So we have so many questions. So would you consider? No. Would you consider yourself an activist?
You know, I was thinking about that, and I was like, the dictionary definition of activist is someone who campaigns for a common cause, right? And for me, I'm like, am I a campaigner? Like, it's the same way when people ask me, are you a content creator? I'm like, I've never seen myself as a content creator, but here I am creating content.
Right.
So I guess I'm a
good content
creator.
Actually.
Thank you.
Yeah,
But so I'm a content creator. Do I say maybe? I guess I just don't think of it that way. I just say I'm a truth teller and I'm fighting for the most marginalized people in this world. And I think I think maybe that makes me an activist, but I just don't see myself like, oh, I'm an activist. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is what it is.
You don't see yourself as an activist because of how you see activists.
Yeah, maybe. And it's not in a negative way.
No, it's not. You just don't see yourself how you see activists.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Well, I got two questions.
Yeah.
One, because hearing how you are as far as being caring and you very passionate about politics, do you ever see yourself getting into politics? That's one. And then two, to you in education, are you a teacher?
No, I'm not a teacher. I school life, but I'm not a teacher. More so administrator.
Okay.
So
so that would be because I would either think you would have become into politics or a lawyer.
I was about to say that.
And why not that route? Why did you take the other route versus those two routes? Because it seemed like you'll be good at either one.
Yeah. So I wanted to be a lawyer. And I wanted to I actually really wanted to be a judge. I would always see like TV judges on like TV, like Judge Judy or
Judge Mathis.
Judge Mathis.
Yeah.
But
they both got checks.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
no, really.
Right. And so I would see that and I would be like, oh, I want to do that. Because, right, it's all about judging facts. Really, like if I boiled it down to now as an adult, because as a kid, you don't see that. But now it's like, oh, they're just making sure that they're the arbiter of facts in that room. And we're dealing in facts. So yeah, I could see that, but then I started thinking about like, oh damn, I gotta go to like however many years of law school it is, and like all this stuff, and I'm just like, maybe not. So I remember going into college and going in as a communication major. I really wanted to work on.
Shout out to that. That's my major.
Yeah, I wanted to work on the radio.
Me too. That's changed my mind real quick.
Yeah.
Why?
Because the pay ain't there.
That's right.
The pay ain't there.
No, they don't make money.
But I think if you
build, and that's no shade.
If you build yourself up,
what?
Well,
now you gotta really put in some work. You gotta really be like networking, having some good content, having some followers. But the salary,
it's just so low.
It's not there.
So now there's social media.
There's a lot of perks to it, so maybe that helps. But they don't get. So I changed it. I'm still a communication major, undergrad.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
The money. So it's not where the money resides.
Not where the money resides. So I get so that was part of it. But then I got into an intro to communication course, and they were talking about like dogs communicate through barking and whales communicate through their blowhole. And I was like, this ain't for me. And I remember I sat down with my counselor at the time and he was like, well, Brian, you got to do something you're passionate about in your undergrad and do something for your actual career in your master's. And I was like,
smart.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, I love I love politics and I love talking about politics. So I was like, why not? So I did political science, got all A's straight through. And I was like, yeah, this is it. And then, then during college, I learned that I can get a free master's if I do the education route. See, now here's the thing. Now I'm about to put y'all on game, right? And for the people that are watching, let me put them on game too, because I actually made a video about this years ago. The amount of money I saved in college by going the education route, I saved over $180,000 in my undergrad and grad experience. Why? Because I was an RA for 3 years. People don't know that's a resident assistant. You are overseeing other students as a student leader. I got free housing and a free meal plan. Every year for the summer, I had an on-campus job. And every person that worked at the university as an administrator became my mentors because they were my bosses.
Right.
And a lot of them were like, well, why don't you get into something called residence life? And I was like, well, what the hell is that? And they're like, well, you can get into my position as my boss at that time, right? The boss of an RA was getting free housing, free meal plan, no utilities at the pay, all of these things. And so I was like, sign me the fuck up.
Yeah.
and so I was like, sign me the fuck up. So I was like, great. So I got my master's in education with a concentration of higher education. At the same time, I did an assistantship at the university where I was the boss of RAs as a grad student, got free housing, free meal plan, free tuition, and a check on the side. And then I did it. Then I got into it professionally, and I did that for a couple of years. And I was able to stack my bread, and then move on to my next venture. But now I can say I have a master's, right? I can say that I had my bachelor's. I can say that I understand the real concepts of political science, but also how to navigate higher education and provide resources to people who don't have the resources or the know-how to get there.
And how to finesse.
How to finesse. So,
right, because I sure paid for my degree. I'm like,
oh yeah.
Education.
Yeah, it was able, and debt-free. Glory to God.
Yes.
Amen.
Glory. Because I'm ready for mine to get tossed out.
Good.
Thank God for the VA loan.
That's right.
Yeah. Shout out to your VA loan.
Okay, so I want to go back to what we were talking about, which was Project 2025.
Let's do it.
So just to be clear, do you feel like it's going to affect people in a negative way or positive way? Do you feel like there's anything positive out of it? Because I try to look at things on both sides. Tell me a little bit more how you feel about it.
Project 2025 is only positive for one person, and it's if you're a white male. That's the reality.
So what about white girls?
Look, Project 2025 wants to dismantle the Department of Education.
Let's talk about that.
Wants to do that, right? Wants to make sure that women don't have pretty much damn near any rights, rolling back all their civil liberties. And we're not just talking about bodily autonomy. We're talking about IVF, right? And right now they came out and attacked Tim Walz, vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris, because Tim Walz talked about the fact that him and his wife had to go through IVF, right? And they were like, no, it wasn't IVF. He's lying. And then you look at the facts and it's IUI and it's intrauterine insemination instead of in vitro fertilization. But both of them are fertility treatments. Both of them help you to get a child if you can't do it the quote unquote organic way. So what the fuck we talking about? We splitting hairs when you over here can't even bring out one specific detail about a healthcare bill that you've been talking about for 8 years. But neither here nor there, right? Like rolling back civil liberties, rolling back healthcare for LGBTQIA+, rolling back, literally firing anybody in the federal government that does not, by the way, that does not certify that the 2020 elections were stolen. And if they cannot certify that they are loyal to Trump, they are going to fire every one of them and put them in with Trump loyalists in all forms of federal government. Also, they're going to try to dismantle the checks and balances of the House and Senate, right? So the way that works, you have the Supreme Court of the United States and you have the House and Senate, which make up the legislature, right? Legislature. And we usually have all those branches, executive branch, 3 branches that check each other if they are out of whack. They want to dismantle that. They want to have complete authority, want to completely do everything by executive order, make sure that Trump has all power. And really, if you can sow enough chaos and create this civil war and divide America enough, you can instill martial law. You can take over the country if you like.
That's exactly what he's doing.
January 6th was a small piece of that.
Small piece of that puzzle.
What that can look like.
That's right. When we say existential threat to democracy, we're not just saying that because it's buzzwords. And I think the unfortunate part is that every election before this one, we have said that it's the most consequential election of our lifetime.
We hadn't seen nothing yet.
This shit right here. This shit right here.
Right here.
This shit right here. This shit right here is the existential threat to democracy, and this is the consequential election. So I need people to, if they're jaded, if they're tuning out, tune back in. Because that's what they want you to do.
As I was tuned out.
Well, people don't really understand what's going on as well. So this is why I feel like episodes as such, people can just kind of Google and get their own
factual information.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll take this information and research some things that they have interest in. So I love that. So going back to Department of Education. What do you feel about that? How do you think that will affect America just in general? Just kind of get rid of it.
Especially because you came from a Title IV school.
Right.
I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
Because 70%, I think, of APS schools have 90% or more of children that are impoverished.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and I didn't know that statistic, but that doesn't surprise me. Look,
I read that on one of our episodes.
Yeah. So here's what I'm going to say to that, right? This has always been about, I mean, when they talk about they want to dismantle DEI efforts.
Yeah.
We have to zoom out.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
Right. You like to lay the foundation.
And we bring that down. But you got to get that foundation, because I know that there's a lot of people working with a different skill set and knowledge set. So here's the reality. Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Diversity is bringing people to the conversation who normally would not have the opportunity to be in the conversation.
Say that for me one more time.
Diversity,
say camera.
Diversity is bringing people to the table who have not historically had the opportunity to be at that table.
Period.
Okay.
Equity, right? Equity is about creating avenues that are going to level the playing field. If you are a millionaire, as an example, you may not need a specific tax break or tax credit.
Right.
Versus somebody who's in not a millionaire status, that you're under a specific threshold, right? Like, we have to understand that it just gets you to that next level. We've all seen that person standing on whatever little step stool to see the game. Have y'all seen that?
Yeah.
So we've all seen that, right? So that's equity. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Inclusion is making sure that once we're all at the table and we're having a conversation, that everybody's voice is adequately heard, right? So when they talk about they want to dismantle DEI, inevitably what they're saying is there's specific histories we don't want to teach. There's specific truths we don't want to tell because we don't want to be held accountable for them.
Why?
And
go ahead.
Well, the why is simple. I think the why that I've consistently heard is they really think that people want revenge.
Right.
Particularly Black people, particularly people of color. Like, they want that we will do to them what they've done to us
one day.
But it's not fair. But we want equal treatment. But you know what I mean?
But they don't see it that way. See, the reality is when you're at the top of the food chain, right? The lion at the top of the food chain never wants to give up his power to a turtle.
And the lion is actually not the strongest person in the safari.
Was it the rhino?
It's the elephant, right?
The lion's scared of everything in the water. Did you know that?
No.
So they're scared of hippos.
Oh, like they're drinking water, kind of like looking
That's
around.
what they're always looking at. I had no idea.
Attacked.
Alligators are inside of there.
Yeah.
Hippos inside of there. Hippos are extremely territorial. I did not know that, but anyway.
But
Hippos
essentially,
are dangerous.
Yes, they're so cute though, especially when they're young.
Right. So essentially, though, that's the reality, right?
Fear,
right? Fear of what is to come, and that's really the reality. Is
and losing power.
Who's in power? So losing power, fear, and all those things that really inform how they want to retain power, and they will go to the lengths that they need to go to be able to do that. So dismantling the Department of Education, going back to your question, is all about dismantling equitable opportunities, because they know that if they do that, that can be a step going back to segregation, right? Like segregating people from getting to specific levels of education. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is freedom. Knowledge is freedom.
Yes. You know what's so funny to me? Because every time I talk to someone that is pro Project 2025, right? I specifically asked the questions about DEI and what they feel about it. And they always say, hey, I don't know any person that wants to feel like they are DEI higher. And I always try to let them know, and I'm like, you're thinking about the action, but you're not thinking about the why. Why is this in place in the first place? Why is this trying to be taken away? You know what I mean? What it will be the cause and effect of that? Because technically we all can be DEI hires, but we just don't know it. You know what I mean? So,
well, if you want to talk about DEI hire, Donald Trump was a DEI hire.
Ooh.
Donald Trump lost the popular vote. I know, understand that it's the Electoral College that makes the decision, but he lost the popular vote. And the reality is all of his policies don't align with the majority of America. He was a DEI hire and was fired by 81 million Americans.
Right.
That was a strong
statement.
And what did she say? He is weak and
a disgrace.
Right. Who said that?
Kamala Harris.
Yes, yeah.
Kamala Harris last night.
After he was going on about people
Madam
eating cats
President.
and dogs and all kind of craziness.
That wasn't true.
She was like, he
Look
is
it up.
weak.
What was not true?
The cat and dog.
That he said that?
Yeah. No.
No.
The facts.
There's no fact.
I'm like, he
behind
did
it.
say that.
Yeah,
I'm
he
like,
said it.
I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
No,
crazy.
he definitely did say that.
We was talking about it yesterday about the them wanting to take away Black history, and they was talking to me about that, and I was like, I didn't think that they were. I'm not gonna say that they didn't know what they were talking about. I'm not gonna say that, but
You did. That's basically saying it. Anyway, I'm kidding.
well, I didn't mean that, but I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to. I would want to take slavery out. I wouldn't want to keep
Why?
talking about slavery.
Why?
You're bringing the mic closer
Because-
so we can hear you.
I wouldn't want to keep talking
I'm
about
kidding.
slavery because I wouldn't want to be looked at as a slave.
But it's still a part of history.
Right. So I'm like, how, like when you say when they're trying to take it out, like what does that really mean? Because like when I think about, okay, what will they take out that's important
Slavery.
for us? That's what I'm saying. Okay, that's one. But like how, let's say they took it out. What do you think will happen? Because I know like right now something will happen. Because I said you should just teach it at home.
But not everybody has the
Right.
not everybody has the specific resources to do that and or the time to do that.
Okay.
I think about my mom. My mom did not have the time to be able to teach to homeschool me or to teach me for anything, right? Because there was a lack of resources. There was a lack of leisure time. My mom didn't have no damn time for that. As a matter of fact, a lot of people would always think someone who is right, who like gifted and talented, right? You're smart, you're intelligent, all this stuff. That parents always expect that parents had like a high regard or high expectation. Not to say my mom didn't have a high expectation, but my mom hated school too.
Yeah.
Right.
I
So
see
my mom
Matilda.
The mom was like, right. My mom was like, I understand. My mom was like, I understand if you get a C, just pass.
Just do your best.
Just do your best. And that was it. But I knew better. I knew that knowledge was freedom, right? I just at an early age, I knew that it was a ticket out.
Yeah.
Right.
So the whole point, when you ask me, what do you think will happen? Here's the reality. There's a lot that still is not taught, even right now,
Right.
to the point where people think that we live in a post-racial society just because Martin Luther King Jr. happened. Just because Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream and did that speech in Washington, D.C. A lot of people think, well, we're past racism. A lot of people think to this day that because Oprah Winfrey is a billionaire, that we don't have any racism. The fact is that Barack Obama became president of the United States. We don't have any racism. And the reality is that those are token examples of what happens. What happens when there is a lack of knowledge as to what exactly we were talking about. Because it wasn't until I got into my master's program where I really learned about critical race theory. See, and a lot of people still don't even know what that is. Right? So they want to talk, right.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about it for a minute.
So they want to talk about critical race theory. So critical race theory was actually created for law schools, and critical race theory it has specific core tenets. And essentially the point is we're going to critique systems of governance and systems that continue to subjugate people, right? And oppress people and all the isms really. And we can't do that if we look at the people, we have to look at the systems. So that's what critical race theory in essence tries to do, is to break down the systems. But when they say critical race theory, they're just saying, don't teach Black history. Don't teach history. Don't teach the fact that Black people really contributed to this society and are part of the fabric of this society. See, the reality is they can say as much times as they want to that they want to remove some of these things because it is radicalizing children, or children should not be knowing about racism. But the reality is the Black child, the brown child in the classroom has to experience racism when they're excluded from specific gatherings with the white kids. Firsthand in many classrooms in America, in many school systems in America. Why is it that little Timmy cannot learn about what's the reason behind some of this, right? Let me the quick story. My grandmother is 104 years old.
Today, right?
She's alive today. Not my great-grandmother. Let me break that down again. My grandmother is 104 years old, still alive with us today. She was born 7 years after Harriet Tubman died. 7 years.
Fresh.
That mentality, listen to the connection I'm about to make to you. The people who were alive in that era and still in the era of my grandmother, who is still with us today, still have the mentality that Black people should be enslaved, that Black people shouldn't have the right to vote, that Black people, in order to vote, should be reading how many damn jelly beans are inside of a jelly jar. Are the same type of people that are in governance. Because to be honest with you, while my grandmother's 104 years old, there's a man named Chuck Grassley in Congress right now who's about 99. There's a man named Mitch McConnell who is in his 80s.
Right.
That ideology never died. It just became covert. It was overt, meaning it was in our faces. People were being lynched. People were being attacked. 1965 Civil Rights Act was passed. And 64 Civil Rights Acts were passed. It just moved everything from in front of your face to behind closed doors.
So basically, we have a lot of those people from that time that's still here, and that's just what they know.
That's right. And they have kids, and those kids have kids, and those kids are part of Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z. That mentality never died. There's a human connection and a human praxis, right?
But they say it's taught.
Right.
Racism is taught.
That's right. You're not born with that.
Right.
So there's a human level of indoctrination that's still going on, and that has still it lives. And those people that are those millennials and those Gen X, those people are your lawyers, are your judges, are your teachers, are your nurses, are your doctors, are your librarians, are your Congress people,
society.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think it's and this might be a crazy question, because I don't think it's really no way to prove it, but what's it called when it's not racism but
stereotype?
No, when you're saying about money. Not so
classist.
Classism. So do you think it's more classism or racism, or are they equal?
In terms of what?
Just out right now. Do you think it's more? Do you think
it's all intersecting? I don't think you can divide that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's specific conversations where you have to break that down.
Yeah, because we just seen Tariq get millionaire NFL football player.
Get slammed on the ground.
Yeah.
Well, but here's my point. My point is,
what did JC say?
They're
we can't say that on YouTube.
You can go that out. But here's the point, right? Like, it depends on the context of the conversation that you're having. But, it's like the conversation of when you have people who are poor white people in the Rust Belt states of this country, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, right? That they're poor and they don't know how to make ends meet. So when you talk to them about white privilege, they don't know what the fuck you talking about.
Right.
Because they're like, well, I don't have privilege. I'm poor. I live in this. I live in a trailer park. I live in this, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you get somebody like Lil Wayne who said he's never experienced racism.
Right. So you have, but that's not what we're talking about. When we talk about white privilege is the amount of injustice that you are shielded from, given your specific identities. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
Not. I'm poor and that I experience. No,
like white privilege doesn't mean you're having land and assets handed down to you. It just means that you're not going to be subjected to the same missed opportunities, the same 4-time level of incarceration for petty crimes. Like there's
based on
privilege doesn't necessarily mean your class.
Right, like Donald Trump.
You're just privileged because of your race.
Mugshot.
There's also privilege because of gender.
Yeah, that's right.
But there's a lot of injustice that comes to women. I mean, we still haven't closed the pay gap.
That's right.
With women and men. So I don't think it's necessarily class versus race.
That's right.
It's together, because you can be white and poor and you still don't experience what you would if you were Black and rich.
Are you familiar with the Daily Wire?
Am I
familiar with the Daily Wire?
Some stuff, not.
Are you? A couple people from there. Candace Owens was from there. Ben Shapiro was from the. Are you familiar? with
they fired.
I thought
Candace.
he was going to be the VP, Shapiro, right?
I'm not 100% sure about that, but I know that Ben
Shapiro.
Oh, different Shapiro.
Yeah. Yeah, they did fire
Candace Owens.
But and then what's the other guy name? Peterson. Can't think his first name, but his last name is Peterson. And when you was talking about the pay gap, because they did a lot of debates on the pay gap, and so what do you feel about the pay gap? Do you think it's really a pay gap? Because they said on average men work more than women. On average, men work the more tougher jobs than women. So
I don't think that's what they're referring to. They're referring to people who have the same job and still getting paid less.
That's right. So here's what I'm gonna say, right? That argument is usually given when we're talking about the pay gap. It's like,
right.
well, women, have to get off of work for certain periods of time if they're, giving birth and they have maternity leave, right? That's not what we're talking about, right? I think that's the argument that they try to use to say that the pay gap doesn't exist,
right.
To deflect from the real conversation that the pay gap does exist. The reality is, if you look at specific jobs, there are specific ways that women have been socialized at times. So just an example, women are socialized not to negotiate salary. Now, there are statistics that show, right, that women won't apply to a specific job if they meet 80% of the qualifications on that job description. But men will apply if they meet 40% of it.
40.
You know what I'm saying?
I just took that training today.
That's right. So the reality is,
really?
On everything, I took that training today. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Really?
That's 100% a fact. That's why, like, when I interview candidates, my company, to try to eliminate pay gaps, we're trained not to ask you what your current salary is. Because what people will do is, let's throw this out there. I'm interviewing you for a role that's 100K. You have the same job right now, but you get 60K. I could tell you, well, I'll pay you 65. You'll bite. That's not right. Because I know this job pays 100K. So that's hiring biased. And you're essentially feeding into the ongoing issues of pay gaps because you're not paying someone what the role is worth.
That's right.
You're just willing to give them more than what they're making now.
That's right.
You're not closing the gap.
Right. And you're saying they do that to women more?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Because a woman won't really negotiate her salary. I don't know if it's just not knowing how, or some women may be more timid. That may be a personality trait that's not, doesn't belong to men as much as women maybe. But I do feel like working in corporate America, I can say I've been in positions where I've taken roles and I've overheard someone say what they're getting paid and it was way more than me.
That's right.
That's because I took that. So if I would have pushed back on that and I would have said, hey, well, actually, I was really looking to make this amount of money. Can you meet me there? I would have got it. And I've been in situations where I accepted a role and said what I wanted. And the lady was nice enough. She was like, say you want more.
Yeah.
Say you want more.
Yeah.
And I got it. So it's like, that's pay gap.
Yeah.
Like it's happening because women, if I'm correct, there are more women, last time I did a statistic, with graduate degrees than there are men.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean we're necessarily more educated as in intelligence, but if we're going off educational credits and credentials.
Weren't they Black women?
9% of Black women have master's degree.
9% of Black women. But how many percentage of women have
education?
Yeah.
Oh, masters in general?
Correct.
I don't know. But I do know there are more women with masters than men.
And I think the statistic to that as well is that Black women are the most educated out of the groups.
Especially in Atlanta, from I read some type of news statistic.
Compensated.
Right. And so 100%.
So it just doesn't align. So I do have big issues with pay gap and being paid fairly and treated fairly as a woman. I'm a minority woman and I normally am in rooms with all men, white men. And you have to navigate those spaces, but you do have to learn how to advocate for yourself. So I do think class, race, they're separate, but that gap is really big in corporate.
Yeah.
Big time. You don't really even see a lot of minorities in corporate. The company I work for now, very diverse. Before, I came from a commercial real estate firm.
Right.
And you think that's because of DEI or just...
I feel like I'm fortunate enough to work for companies that still have DEI. A lot of people are eliminating them. If they're not there, I don't know what these offices would look like, because who's going to advocate? Where are the laws in place to say if I don't get this job, or you have to have this many minorities in this company? Like, you need that. And if you don't.
Yeah, but and let me also say this, because about DEI, when we talk about DEI and we say DEI hire, like I have a huge problem with that, because as an example, they talked about those pilots that, right? They were like, oh, well, there's more black pilots that are flying planes and all this stuff. And then you had Charlie Kirk, who, if y'all don't know him, he's a conservative, like
Candace Owens homie.
Right, podcaster and stuff like that. And he said, well, I'll just be honest with you. If I knew that my pilot was black or my pilot was a DEI hire, I probably would just get off the plane, right? Because this mentality from a conservative perspective, from the perspective is that if you are quote unquote a DEI hire, that we're going to lower the bar or the standard that you need to meet in order to create the opportunity for you to get this job. And that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is
crazy, because I heard that, and I'm not going to lie. I kind of agree with it. And I will only say I agree with it because I felt like, and I'm going to let you, because I feel like you are about to explain this, because when you hear DEI, I thought that it meant I'm going to hire you just to meet quota.
Because I have to.
Not because you are the best pilot. So if that is what it is, then I can see why somebody will feel like that. But go ahead, because I feel like
no one wants to feel like they're a DEI.
No. What I'm saying is, if let's just say someone was hired because of just who they are.
Correct. Given an opportunity,
I wouldn't. If we're talking about a pilot, I would want the best pilot.
But the inherent judgment there in that question, right? I'm not saying that you're doing that, but I'm saying that in the question, what is essentially happening is you're saying that this pilot that just so happens to be black would not be the best pilot, or would not have the qualifications or credentials in order to get that. When we do know that there are biases in hiring practices, we do know that there are statistics and studies that show and research that proves that if you have a specific name that is too difficult to pronounce, that you're not even getting in part of the research, the hiring bin, that you're not even going to get past the recruiter, right? That if you have a specific racial identity, a specific ethnicity, if you have that there are specific racial and other biases that are in hiring practices that implicate, right, that people are not being looked at fairly, right? As an example,
the opportunity,
as an example, there are specific trainings that people have to go through if they're going to become a recruiter, right? For instance, some of the policies that some people in corporate America have been employing, and definitely in education, we've seen, instead of us using names, we have to use candidate numbers, right? To identify the differences between the candidates while we are reading their responses and putting in specific,
That's good.
Right?
That's good.
So that we're blindly, right? We're not looking at pictures of people. We don't have any demographic information or any specifiers, so that we are not inclined to go on LinkedIn and look at what they look like and look at what their resume is like. There are specific age things, right? That are related as well, right? Like, for instance, there's a whole bunch of research now that's saying in your resume, do not put the years which you graduated.
Yeah.
Just say that you have the education that you have, because otherwise people look at that and then start calculating, well, 4 years before that, 18 years, this person's 52.
Right.
And so then you won't give the job to somebody who's older, because you're going to prefer a younger candidate, because you potentially have the bias that you want longevity in the career or in the field or in the position that I'm hiring for.
Right.
And you can pay them less. So if they're younger, if they have lack, right? So there's a whole lot of different things. And so when we're talking about DEI hire, right, it's not just race. Think about diversity in thought, diversity in age, diversity in so much different types of diversity. And so I have a problem with that, because the conservative mindset is, well, we're lowering the bar. That's nothing of the sort. It's the fact that there are systemic problems in hiring practices that have created an environment where people can't even get the job.
All right.
So it's not about that. It's not about
because I also seen it was Charlie Kirk and Candace Owens, and Candace Owens was saying that she's married to a white guy, so her kids are mixed. So she says she's going to tell them to mark black on any application so that she can take advantage of DEI. So it's like, I don't know when it comes to DEI.
I think do you get mostly of your information from Candace Owens?
I'm not gonna lie. I like Candace Owens. I like Jordan Peterson is his name. You familiar?
No, I don't know who that is.
Jordan Peterson.
But here's what I'm gonna say.
Uh-huh.
Not telling you not to listen to them. I'm gonna tell you to expand who you listen to in terms of getting
give me some names I can check out.
Mentally Divine.
When we get off. What? Hold on.
You just stopped.
Wait, hold on.
Right? Yeah, you stopped mid-sentence like.
He's like, when we get off camera, you let me know the list. But yeah, no. So.
We're actually getting ready to wrap up. I have like 2.
Damn, already?
Right? It's almost an hour.
Damn.
But I have some really good questions I want to ask you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Right.
Let's do it.
This is off topic. So I wanted to know this because you seem like you are a very well-rounded young man. I say young man because you're younger than me. But what would you say would be the most important lesson that you learned in your life?
Closed mouths don't get fed.
Okay.
Closed, and that's just on my spirit because of some conversations I've been recently having. In this world of content creating, it's very important that you're understanding. I mean, anywhere, right? When as it relates to business, as it relates to corporate, as it relates to some people are entrepreneurs. Know your damn worth and ask for that.
Talk about it.
And with that, be okay if they come back with a no.
Yeah.
Or if they say, you know what, we have to pass up on this opportunity because you're out of our budget, because here's the reality. Flip that and don't just say, damn, I lost my opportunity. Damn, I lost my money. No. Flip that and think about the silver lining. The fact that this person even came to offer you some money for a contract will reaffirm the fact that you have value and that more contracts are to come, because the reality is other people are about to see that damn value.
Yes.
So be unafraid. Be unafraid.
Talk to them.
To specifically ask for your worth, because it's coming. May not be now. I can't tell you when it will come, but it will come. Closed mouths don't get fed.
Yes.
That's good.
So after hearing your story, where you come from, how has failure shaped who you are today?
Failure is super important. I don't know if I'll talk about it. And I don't even say this as failure, but I think the way that I would look at that is, and here's what I will say. Failure is important. You learn a lot of lessons from failing, right? You have to try new shit in order to find out what you're good at, what you're not good at. And if you're not good at it, that's fine. Just change your damn mind and move to something else. But try. You never know. You never know if it's going to land. I'm going to be honest with you. Many times, I started this damn journey and I thought about, damn, I'm going to quit. When I first started content creating in 2021,
why?
I started in Twitter Spaces. Because I was like, oh, let me just listen to what the communities of people are talking about. And so it became very familial and very like, oh, I'm talking to these people. And I learned that there was very different niches on Twitter at the time. This is before Elon Musk got it over. And I remember going into medical spaces. And they were talking, it's 2021, the pandemic. We were talking about masking and anti-vaxxing. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me get on there. And there were doctors, actual physicians having these conversations. And I went up there and they were like, oh, but at the time it was, I wasn't Brian Baez, I had Brian MED, right? Because I was just my master's. I wasn't really taking it seriously. And they were like, this brother has his master's, let's go ahead and have him on the stage. And I'm like, I'm not a physician, but I can talk to you about the public health perspective and how it impacts people and how people are receiving this information. Because y'all are medical professionals, but we are people and we have to receive this medical information, and how we can articulate these messages will impact people at the daily level. So I brought in where my niche is. I didn't try to take space in a space where I didn't have the expertise. I added my value to the table where I knew that I could.
I love that.
Right? And so I was able to do that. And so I really started familial. It started off like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? I made friends in many different sectors, physicians, psychologists, lawyers, doctors, like everybody. And I remember it started off as me creating spaces for people just to talk about what's going on. People came and divulged trauma that they never told anybody before. And there were literal psychologists in the room that were able to be like, oh, and provide literal care in the moment for free. And I kept on getting messages on the side like, Brian, what you're doing here is so impactful. My following grew from 300 to 3,000 in 6 weeks. Wow. And then from there, I started, people started hearing how I articulated myself. And then came the TV deals. Then came the radio. Then came me getting on TikTok and making videos. My friend really influenced me to do it because he was doing it. Too Raw, Too Real. Shout out Kenny. Too Real. And so from there, I started making some political videos. Then I started getting paid through TikTok, started working with Stacey Abrams' campaign for governor, like all these different things. And then that's it. That's what happened.
So what drives your passion? What is your passion and what drives it?
Getting information to the people.
Mm-hmm.
Getting information to the people and making sure that people understand that they can get involved in politics, that they can get involved in some of these concepts that people have for a long time not had the resources, not had the knowledge to.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what directly impacts people. And me being the person to be able to articulate the information in a way that makes it accessible. You don't know how many times I get in my damn inbox. The checks are nice. The checks are nice. Keep bringing them. But let me say this. The people that come into my inbox, my comment section, the DMs, like everything, and say, I was never into politics. I never gave a fuck. But because I heard you speak about it, you broke that shit down.
Mm-hmm.
Boom. Hook, line, and sinker.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the reward. So that's my passion. That's what I like to do. Getting that information to people. That's so impactful for me.
Okay.
I love that.
So, last question. What would you say outside of the ATL Community Gather Around podcast and the Mentally Divine?
Yeah.
What would you say that which podcasts are you watching or what books are you reading?
So, I mean, I've read a lot. My books that I like to read are sometimes could be considered dense, but just based on research and facts. Two of the best books that I think I've ever read. One was The Myth of Race, written by Robert Walt Sussman. He really chronologizes how racism started from its inception to where we are right now.
You like, is it Michael or Michelle Alexander? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know who that is.
I'll show you.
Yeah. Also, the second book that I would say is The Color of Law.
Mm-hmm.
Color of Law by Richard Rothstein.
Mm-hmm.
Great book that talks about the literal, the difference between de facto segregation and de jure segregation. The fact that de facto segregation is like, oh, all these black people like to live next to each other because black people like to live next to each other and white people like to live next to each other. No. Is de jure segregation, which is there are literal laws and policies. Yeah, literal laws and policies and governance and systems that were created and housing authorities and associations that were created to write underwritten manuals to create the literal segregation of people in communities. Redlining, that's where all of that comes out. So Color of Law, Richard Rothstein, and Myth of Race. And the reason why I say that is because it's important to, I've always been amazed by people who were able to say, oh, in 1972.
I love that. It's like, wow, you just pulled that
out of your ass, right? Like you had that. That has always got me to my next level. So I've always wanted to do that in my mind. And I'm like, hopefully that's what I'm doing nowadays.
And for the people, where is your social media handle so that people can follow you?
Twitter, TikTok, Mentally Divine, Instagram Threads, Mentally Divine Official, because they took Mentally Divine, but Mentally Divine Official, and on YouTube, my podcast, the Mentally Divine Podcast. You can find us or find me at Mentally Divine on YouTube.
All right. You know what's so funny? I'm so happy we did this.
No, really. I mean, you've been great.
Yes.
Really
I continuously learn a lot every time I hear you speak, and it was no different today. So check him out, guys. Where's my camera at? Check him out, guys. ATL Community, Gather Around. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
All right.
Out.
Thank you for coming.